Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's video is going to be another medicine related one, but looking at my Cambridge interview. If you haven't seen my other videos before, please do check them out. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. If you don't know anything about me, I actually don't go to Cambridge University. I went to St Andrews University. I studied medicine there for my preclinical years, and I'm now at the University of Manchester doing my clinical years. So, talking a little bit about a background about myself, I applied, as most people do in their when they're in college, for the university, and I applied for medicine at Cambridge. I got an interview. That was the only interview that I had for medicine that year, and it didn't go very well at all. But then the following year, when I reapplied for medicine, I applied to St Andrews University as one of mine, and that was the only interview that I had for that year. I got in and I went along my medicine journey. So I'm going to be talking about this Cambridge interview because I remember before I did mine, everyone always told me, you can't prepare for Cambridge interviews. They're one of those things you just can't prepare for. And honestly, that's a load of rubbish. Genuinely, that's a load of rubbish. And I will give you pointers on what to do if you ever come across, if you get yourself into a Cambridge medicine interview. Basically, I'm just going to go through my experience, what I learnt, and any pointers from that. So like my other videos, I'm going to separate this one up into different chunks again. Firstly, talking about how I found out about my interview and that kind of application process. Then going to talk about each of my interviews in turn. So there were 3 interviews and they were just one-to-one interviews. And I'm also going to give a little bit of a summary at the end of what I think would be my main pointers for people moving forward from that. So firstly, talking about how I found out about my interview. So maybe before that, me actually applying. So when you apply for Cambridge, they give you another questionnaire afterwards. So after you do your whole UCAS application, you get this little questionnaire that asks you a few different questions. That asks you specifically about what college you're applying to. Also asks you the breakdown of the UMS for each of your exams. So I was part of the old cohort that did the old AS A-level, which meant that I actually did actual exams and had grades from that. And specifically with exam results, the UMS, so that's out of 100, and Cambridge, they look for an average, I believe, around I can't even remember what it's I know it's 90 something that you've got to get in your AS, the average UMS. So you've got to be scoring quite highly, and it's not just a normal A. You've got to get above 90% basically in those exams, or whatever, for UMS, for that. And then that goes on this questionnaire, and they also ask what modules you're doing for your A-levels. So say for example you're doing A-level biology, they'll ask what modules you're studying, for example plant biology or human biology or whatever, and then what time of the year you're studying them. I'll talk a little bit about that later because it does play some relevance. And then I believe that's what they asked for. Yeah, that's all I can remember. It was years ago. But anyway, so in terms of what college I applied for, I applied for Gonville and Keys, so it's just known as Keys. And I don't, when I look back, I don't really remember why I applied there. But I remember it was really old and it looked cool. Yeah, I don't really know. I don't think I actually knew that much about the colleges at all. But there's the option, if you don't actually know too much, you could just do an open application. I don't know, I specifically applied for one. I don't know why. I don't know. Anyway, moving on to actually finding out about the interview itself. So I was actually away at the time, abroad, quite some miles away. I was really, really, really far away. And I remember thinking to myself that I wasn't going to get an interview because it was quite late on in the term, towards the Christmas holidays. And all of my friends that had applied, or anyone that I'd known that had applied, had already heard back whether they had an interview or not. And it was just nearing the holidays, and I just thought, you know what, it's just not going to happen. But I checked my emails randomly, and I actually got an interview offer, and that interview offer was for the following week. So basically, they gave me a week's worth of notice for my interview, which is great. Whereas like everyone else that I knew had like at least like 2 weeks, which is, you know what, that makes a bit of a difference. And also I was away at the time, and the interview day that I had was literally like the day after I landed, which was really annoying. But of course I was excited at the time. I didn't really give like that, I didn't really like go off on a tangent. I was just more excited that I had an interview. But I didn't have like any prep with me, couldn't prep, all that kind of stuff. And that's a little bit stressy when I look back on it. Like that wasn't the best decision. But anyway, whatever. Going over to the interview day, and my first interview. So I remember being stuck in traffic on the way and then getting stressy, obviously. Eventually got there, registered and all that kind of stuff, and found out that my first interview was one of the first interviews that day. So obviously rushed over, went to that, and I just waited outside the room because I was a few minutes early. And I remember just trying to like compose myself. It's all fine. I thought I'd like had like a hold of my nerves or whatever. Don't know. Went in, general introduction, all lovely. It was all fine. Sat down, and he started praising me on my personal statement, saying that it was really good, really liked what I was doing, and he started talking about something that I was talking about in my personal statement, which was my EPQ. If you don't know what an EPQ is, it's known as the Extended Project Qualification, which is just like another little kind of side project that you can do alongside your A-levels. It doesn't count as an A-level. It's literally just something to talk about. It just shows that you've got some sort of interest in science, because the topic that you can pick can be literally on anything. And my topic was on a drug that is currently used for another chronic condition, but that it was being explored for its potential to erase memories in patients that have PTSD. So I'd obviously talked about that, and he was just mentioning how it was really good, really liked the structure of my personal statement, blah, 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 and then asked me the question, okay, so this drug, like, what's it currently used for? I couldn't remember at all. I must have had like this mind blank, couldn't think of what the answer was, and just said to him, I don't remember. And I think that played on my mind for the rest of the interview, because it's something that I should have known. My nerves got the best of me, I don't know, whatever. But literally my personal statement, word for word, it told me exactly what the drug was currently being used for, which was really annoying. Anyway, the rest of the interview carried on, and the questions were all relating to neurons. So it was something to do with, it was carrying on like the scientific basis, because the drug was used for MS, so it was just like talking about neurons and stuff. And I remember in my head thinking, this makes sense, but like I could have gone over this beforehand. I could have just looked at like neurons and stuff. I don't know why people didn't tell me to have a look at the science behind stuff that I'd put in my personal statement. I was literally told by people before I went into my interview, don't even look at anything because you'll just confuse yourself and stress yourself out. That was their advice. That was people's advice for this interview, was don't do anything, basically. And it was one of the worst things that was actually given to me. So don't do that. If anything, please do go and do some work, because you can do more than enough work. Also, annoyingly for me, when I went into college the next week, sat in my biology class, spaced out a little bit, but looked at the board, what did I see? Exactly what the interviewer was talking about. My teacher was writing it up on the board. And then in that moment, I realised that, that questionnaire has some relevance, because I'd put down what exam board I was studying for, and what modules I was studying, and at what time of the year. So they were asking me questions related to that. So that's my number one tip for that interview, is to remember what modules you put down, and basically know all the science knowledge a little bit. Don't be a last minute crammer for that year. Don't do what I did, and because I was a last minute crammer and it didn't pay off for me for that. So definitely keep up to date with what you're learning, because that will come into your interviews for that. Moving on to my second interview. So I'd finished this one, gone down to the common room, and was just talking with other students that were also having their medicine interviews as well. And there was one guy that was going to have his next interview in the room that I just had mine in, and my next one was going to be in the room opposite to that. Now, to get to those interview rooms, you have to kind of go through I remember there was a lot of stairs, and it was quite windy and a little bit like a maze to get up there. But I remembered the route. I'm quite good with directions sometimes. Sometimes I'm quite good with the directions. So I remembered where to go and said that, you know what, I'd show him where to go. It's absolutely fine. So we walked up and we were just waiting there because the people that were having their interviews at that time were still in there. So we were just waiting. And I was just kind of starting a light conversation. It was quite just kind of, I don't know, general kind of chit chat or whatever, just to kind of pass the time. And I remember this guy just said, didn't even say anything really, just went, shh, and then proceeded to walk towards the door that he was going to have his interview in and put his ear next to it. I'm not even making this up, this guy actually did that. I know it's competitive, and I know people can be really competitive when it comes to interviews, let alone a Cambridge interview, but really, that I think is a little bit excessive, and yeah, he knows what he did. He knows who he is, and he knows what he did. Anyway, ooh, notification. So we were waiting, and I was a little bit gobsmacked about what had just happened. Regardless, I went into my next interview, and this one was with a cardiologist. So the thing that Cambridge does is it tells you the interviewers' names beforehand, and it's really up to you to go and Google their pardon me. So they tell you the interviewers' names beforehand, and it's up to you to go and Google them or whatever to find out what their fields are. Well, my general tip for their interview is just go and research the fundamental principles of that particular speciality that that interviewer's background is. So, for example, my interviewer was a cardiologist, and the questions were all relating to the fundamental principles of cardiology, like cardiac output. And if you just kind of brush over or learn that kind of stuff, which isn't hard, that would really play relevance into your interview. Obviously, you don't have to go into depths of it too much, but just having a little bit of an awareness to bring up things is really useful. And that's my number one tip for that interview. Coming outside of the interview, so that guy that was putting his ear against the door had asked me to wait there for him for lunch because he couldn't remember his way down. And I was like, you know what, I don't mind, it's absolutely fine. So I waited for quite some time. I remember my interviewer walked out, looked at me and looked like, yeah, this is we're never going to see you again. I kind of looked back, I was like, yeah, I know. You know, the exchange that you get, it's an awkward exchange, but you knew, I knew anyway at that point. So I was waiting there for quite some time for this guy to come out, and he eventually did come out, and this is when I had a realisation of, do I really want this? Because he'd come out, and the interviewer, so my first interviewer, was kind of congratulating him, saying, you've done really, really well, giving me a handshake and saying, oh, have you had lots of practice before? Have you done this before? And obviously he's going to say no. But then it kind of just hit me is that if the kind of people that are getting praise are the kinds of people that are listening in on the door, I mean, I don't want to be chilling with that. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I thought it was just a bit off. Obviously that interviewer's not going to know that and everything, but I mean, that guy would know it himself. Anyway, moving on. Went down to lunch, and this is something I need to tell you about. So when I said I was away on holiday, I was doing a detox at the same time with my mum. We were doing a non-refined sugar detox. So no refined sugar at all. We weren't even having like proper carbs as well, like starchy carbs. And so basically I hadn't had any of that for about like just over like 2 weeks. So if any of you have done that before, you know what it's like when you try and have some sort of refined sugar again. Like, it hits you hard. And I didn't take full like awareness of that. So I decided to, I mean, if free food's there, I'm gonna eat. I'm gonna eat it. So there was pasta, and then there was cake and custard. And I definitely ate it. I don't think it was the wisest choice, just because of what I just said, but yeah, I did eat it. And it definitely did hit me hard. Yeah, I've also learned from that point that heavy carbs at lunchtime don't work for me. It's a learning point that I've taken for life. You know what? That's a learning point that I've taken from that day for the rest of my life. Heavy carbs and me don't work at lunchtime. Anyway, so that refined sugar, that cake and custard, it really did hit me hard. And I remember going back down to the common room, and I definitely had a sugar high. I was I could feel like my pupils dilate, like it was that much of like a rush, and I just felt like on top of the world, basically. I remember everyone was like sitting there, it was quite quiet, and they were doing like crosswords, and I'm not really a crossword kind of person, so I mean, I sat there, had like the odd conversation with people, but it's not my kind of thing. I'm quite rubbish at them, to be honest. So I mean, yeah, like I'll listen in and try and give a bit of input, but I'm not really gonna get anywhere with those. But then some of the current students at the time, they were trying to engage everyone, and they brought out this like trivia game. I wasn't very good at it, but I definitely got involved. Especially me on a sugar high, I definitely got involved and I got into it. So much so that I almost forgot that I had a last interview. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed that part. I did remember thinking that I don't entirely feel comfortable, and some people had told me beforehand, this is probably like one of the only bits of actually good advice that I had, was that you get a proper feel for a university at the interview, and that's because you're around current students and also around prospective students as well, so you get a real feel for the kind of vibe of it. And they were lovely, everyone was so nice. I just felt a little bit out of place, but that's just the way it is. Then so I went up to my final interview. This is my final interview one. So yeah, I just about remembered that I actually had a final interview and had to dash off to the other side of town because that was where that one was. And it was like in this attic, this small room, but then we all had to wait like individually in like the side room next to it. And it was like really dimly lit. There was like a nice chair there. It was really quiet. And like I said before, I had a bit of a sugar high. But when you're up, you come down. And I definitely came down. It hit me hard. I crashed. I had a sugar crash, and admittedly so, I went to sleep. I had a little bit of a snooze. I mean, no one else was there, it was quiet. It's not the best advice I'd give before an interview because you do feel incredibly groggy afterwards, especially after having like a lot of sugar, and if your body's not used to it, no. But yeah, luckily the floorboards and the doors were really creaky because it was an old building, so I heard those and woke up. But yeah. So I went into this final interview, and once again, I was being praised about my personal statement and my application. They were really impressed by it, and we're talking about something else that I'd mentioned on there. I think I mentioned like something to do like a CPAP, and we were just talking about that. He asked me if I knew what it was, and I'd known that anyway. So I was just talking about that, and then there were more questions about the world of medicine. That's what I would summarise that interview as. It's more of the different like professional bodies within medicine, the NHS, how it's structured, different healthcare professionals, what differentiates them between doctors, and likewise what's your motivation for medicine. So those are my that's my summary for that interview. I do remember he gave me a piece of paper and asked me to analyze a little bit of data, and I obviously hadn't prepared for anything like that before because people told me not to prepare, but he seemed happy by my answer, which was fine. And the feedback that I got from that interview was that was my best interview. Surprise, surprise. And I do remember at one point he asked me, because I didn't prepare anything at all, but he'd asked me what's the National Institute of Clinical Excellence. It's nice, right? And I was just like, I don't know. I don't know. He was asking me if I'd heard of it. I was like, I don't think I have. And I could see him writing on the piece of paper in front of him, hasn't heard of NICE. And when he said NICE out, just has NICE, I knew what that was. It's just because in my head I hadn't kind of thought about it, distinguished each of those. Anyway, my main tip for that interview is get a book. There's loads of medicine books out there, and if you want to know which book I used for my actual St Andrews interview, which really helped me and gave me all the information I ever needed, I'll tell you which one it is, but just ask, and I'll find a link for it, because I definitely did prepare for my next interview. After that one, I definitely prepared for my next interviews. But that's the summary for that one, for that final interview. Just know the world of medicine, basically. Yeah, that finishes me talking about each of the interviews individually, and now I will just give a quick summary overall and a bit of advice. Basically, if someone tells you that you can't prepare for a Cambridge interview, just kindly smile and walk away, because it's a load of rubbish. You really can. And I think it's a shame that there's a disparity between schools and between different people from different backgrounds as to how much information they're told, because I can tell you one thing, in my school they definitely told me, oh, they can just ask you lots of random questions, and it doesn't really have any, you can't really prepare for them. Whereas when I'd spoken to other people that went to other schools, fee-paying schools, for example, they had a lot of preparation given to them and were given so much detailed help throughout. So it's a shame that people have, there is that disparity, but hopefully this video just gives people a little bit of more information as to what to expect from an interview, a medicine interview at Cambridge. And yeah, you can prepare for it. Yeah, that brings me to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed watching and listening to what I had to say. As always, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time.